Let's go live back to Canberra now. Liberal MP Dave Sharma joins us now. It was quite a stoush between Barnaby Joyce and Joel Fitzgibbon. Is this what's going on behind closed doors all over Canberra?
Look, I missed that, Laura, but I just saw the footage of it on television. Look, I think this is a topic on which people have quite different and quite heated views, and I expect that's what came out there.
Yep, I think you're right on that one. Can the coalition, this is the question, can the coalition achieve net zero emissions by 2050, or is it out of the question?
Look, I think we just have to see. I mean, 2050 is a long way away. It's 30 years away. If we went back to 1990 and said where would we be in 2020, I think a lot of people would have a hard time predicting that. But certainly all the trajectories are pointing in the right direction. I think this is the real task for governments here and policymakers, is to help smoothen those trajectories and get them happening as quickly as possible. This is introduction of new technology, market forces, renewable energy storage, all these sorts of things are bending this in the right direction. And we've just got to focus on what we can do to accelerate that transition.
So is Australia's trajectory there as well, do you think? Because this is what we signed up to Paris for, really, ultimately, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. I mean, look, every country that signed up to Paris recognises that the world, and this is the important point to note here, this is a global problem. It's not an Australia-only problem, it's a world problem. The world needs to get to net zero by the second half of the century to limit temperature rises. And look, Australia certainly remains committed to that goal, but we also need the rest of the world to be committed to that goal, and we need to see what's the smoothest and least disruptive way to get to that goal.
Aren't business doing this anyway?
Well, I think businesses are announcing targets, but I don't know, I mean, to the extent that they're actually changing the nature of their operations in order to allow them to meet those targets. I think it varies considerably sector by sector. There are obviously some businesses that are much more exposed to carbon risk, if you like, particularly in the resources and primary production sectors, but there are some in services sectors and whatnot where it's quite different. Airlines, another example where they're very exposed to carbon risk, and how are they going to get to net emissions? That's a very difficult task as well. So I think it really depends on sector by sector.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right on sector by sector. Let's look at the coal industry. 38,000 jobs in this country rely on thermal coal. The market is going the way the market is going. Do you think those jobs are going to be there in 30 years' time? Is it going to matter what governments do?
I think, Australia has a comparative advantage in resources, and I think there will always be people employed in the resources industry in one capacity or another, be it thermal coal, be it coking coal, be it uranium, be it any other number of natural resources that we need to do things like build wind turbines and solar panels and things like that. So, I can't say that the number of jobs in the coal industry will be exactly the same. I don't think anyone could. But I think resources will continue to make a major contribution to the Australian economy, because the world needs what we've got, and that's including in a zero net emissions world. Yeah,
that's right. But when you look at these coal jobs, is it up to governments like yours to have a bit of honesty about where the market is going? If you look at BlackRock, you look at some of the biggest resources countries right around the world moving more towards renewables in one way or another, is it now that you need to start reskilling and preparing this workforce for a future that might look very different?
Look, I mean, I think we always need to be preparing for economic transitions in Australia, and we've been through many in the course of our economic history. But our experience has been that the best way to do this is not through a command and control, centrally planned economy, but allowing investors, market forces, employers and employees to make those sorts of decisions. So I think to the extent that we transition out of some sectors and transition into others, I think the best way is to allow market forces to work and allow that transition to happen in as smooth a way as possible. When
you look at right around Australia, even the state you and I are both from, New South Wales, 2050 zero net emissions target by Gladys Berejiklian. What is the difference really between Gladys Berejiklian and Anthony Albanese? Anything?
Well, I'd say that state governments, and look, I admire the states and territories for signing up to this. Tasmania, incidentally, is actually already at net zero, I believe, because of all their hydro reserves. And look, good on the states and territories for doing this. But as the Commonwealth Government, we're the ones who are ultimately accountable and responsible for meeting Australia's national commitments. This is a binding international commitment that we've entered into with the Paris Agreement, and as we should, we take those sorts of commitments seriously. So I think we're quite right as the Commonwealth to make certain that we can deliver on any commitments we make before we go rashly making them.
OK, well, we'll see where this debate goes in question time today. I think we've got a taste of what's to come just from the corridors there this morning. Before I let you go, a very serious issue in the last week, and we all have in our hearts and minds Hannah Clarke and her 3 little children who died so tragically. There are growing calls for Bettina Arndt to be stripped of her Order of Australia. Should she?
Look, firstly, let me say that this was an awful tragedy, and I think every Australian has been touched by it. I've seen those comments by Ms Arndt. I disagree with them absolutely, but I think the bigger focus here should be on the problem and the scourge of domestic violence and what we can do about it. This isn't good enough. How can we tackle this better? That's really where the focus needs to be right now. Victim
blaming is part of the problem, though, in the larger conversation. Isn't that what Bettina Arndt's done? And does she represent what an Order of Australia recipient should be?
I mean, I fundamentally disagree with her comments. I found them repulsive and abhorrent. Look, I'll leave to Government House, though, which, as I understand, is reviewing this. Whether she should retain that honour or not. But I mean, I don't think her comments make any sort of worthwhile contribution to the debate. They're an awful distraction and they're abominable.
Fair enough, but you do support Government House and the Governor General at least reviewing this decision.
Yes, absolutely, and I've seen that's underway.
Dave Sharma, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Laura.